In today's video, we are going to be checking out Chelsea's last 5 games of the season. That includes the 3 Premier League games and the 2 games against Servette in the Conference League. We're going to assess a few tactical things that we noticed from these games before having a little overview of the 5 games in total. We're going to aim to do this at each international break of the season to have a little overview of Chelsea's season in patches. First game of the season, of course, was Chelsea versus Manchester City, where Chelsea lost 2-0. Now, one of the main takeaways from this game for me was the rest defence and those counter-pressing nets that Chelsea was setting up around Manchester City enable them to sustain possession and actually have a higher field tilt and territory in this game than Manchester City, dominate large periods of the game and create chances from this. Now, this in itself is a massive, massive positive going forwards because against the best team in the league, being able to sustain possession and actually control large parts of the game is exactly what Maresca wants to do. And showing that against Manchester City, and hopefully if they can show that against Arsenal this season as well, shows that it isn't just about dominating the lower tier opposition, but they can also do it against those higher tier oppositions with the right principles in play. Now, yes, Chelsea did lose this game. City did have their own sparks this game too, and there were some defensive frailties within the game. Go check out the Manchester City versus Chelsea review for that. But this was the main takeaway from the game, having periods within the game that Chelsea were in control. Moving on to the second game of the season, which was Chelsea 2, Servette 0. This was Maresca's first win in charge with Chelsea, at least competitive win, not including pre-season. They did create more big chances with 2 and have 59% possession of the ball, setting up in that very familiar 3-2-4-1 or 3-2-5 formation. But we did also see one massive factor in this game, which was that pentagon midfield that we spoke about in the Maresca tactical breakdown at the start of the season. The idea to keep the wingers high and wide and have that striker dropping into that hole to create that pentagon around the opposition midfield line allows you to have that overloaded midfield, break through the lines and then play out wide to find those 1v1 isolations with the wingers. Often you can also see the striker dropping even deeper to then lay it off first time to one of the 8s who are facing forward to then attack. This is something we saw in the second half more so, with Cole Palmer actually taking the striker role and providing this, dropping in as that centre forward, as that sort of 5th man in midfield to then lay it off to the likes of Dewsbury Hall to face forwards. The biggest negative from this game was conceding 22 shots and forcing quite a few late saves for Jorgensen. Luckily, they held on to that 2-0, kept the clean sheet, but in future, and this is something we'll speak about a little bit later, it's just keeping that consistency throughout and being able to control the entirety of a game. Now, Chelsea v Wolves, this was 6-2. This was probably the most fun game of the season, but it was a game of 2 halves. That first half, it was very, very yo-yo-like, back and forth. Wolves having a lot of attacks, breaking onto the Chelsea backline. And Maresca even said in the press conference after the game that the first half, he was not happy with the performance. And it was due to mistakes coming out of the backline and allowing Wolves to attack Chelsea in transition when they're not set up to do so. Luckily, in the second half, they slowed things down, they managed to get their structure correct, and then that combination, that deadly 1-2 punch of Palmer and Madueke managed to take the game out of sight for Wolves before they could really get a foothold back in the game. Chelsea then controlled the rest of the second half, and the second half performance was the best performance of the season so far. We started to see that 3-3-4 formation, which we spoke about a lot in pre-season and a lot at the start of the season as well, so go back and check out some of those videos. But seeing that somebody like Enzo Fernandez, who can drop in and form that 3-man midfield, with then the front 4 with the wingers and the little striker or number 10 combinations out wide to create those little 2v1 tensions, it just creates a very good way to control the game. Again, here is the example of that 3-2 base, but the +1 spot where Enzo can drop in to form that 3-3-4. And this is where I think Chelsea have looked their best this season. Now, dipping back into the Conference League, this was Chelsea's 2-1 loss against Servette. The most disappointing result of the season, most would say, in terms of the expectation going into the game. Chelsea did dominate proceedings, 67% of the ball, 5 big chances, only scoring 1 with that Nkunku penalty to put them 1-0 up. And for many periods of this game, there was actually some really good controlling aspects of the game. Vega playing in that pivot was actually really promising. Playing in the cover shadow of those 4 players, the front 4 pressing for Servette. Again, this is another video that I would highly recommend going and watching the review of, because we spoke a lot more about how the midfield played quite well in this game. But then, again, allowing them to have 15 shots, attack in transition, And again, just being a disjointed team, not knowing when to take control of the game, something they did quite well in the first half, but the second half they didn't do so well. Allowed Servette to get back in the game, score their goals, and change the game on its head. Which brings us on to the last game, which was against Crystal Palace, where it was a 1-1 draw, and I actually think Chelsea played extremely well, and there was a lot of discourse about this game, but I think the tactical acumen of Maresca, the changes he made in this game, and the way that we controlled proceedings was actually absolutely brilliant. Now again, I'm going to point you towards the video that I made about this, because many people didn't understand why certain players were used in certain positions, and I explained it in far more detail over there, but as you can see on screen, very much to do with creating those overloads in all lines of play, the 4v3 at the back, the 3v2 in midfield, and then when you go direct, the 6v, the back 5 of Crystal Palace. So forming those overloads was the most important aspect of the game. Here are some of the stats from the game as well. As I said, Chelsea, in my opinion, they dominated that game, created 5 big chances, didn't manage to put them away, and Palace, with that low XG, still managed to score their goal and nick a point. But I would explain it exactly as that, nicking a point, because I do think Chelsea dominated that game. Maresca's, as I said, tactical acumen to change things up, not stick with what has been working or has worked for him already, but change it to give Chelsea that advantage in play, and it did actually work out. A few more tactical notes to speak about from the stats. Chelsea have conceded so far 3.83 XG in their 3 games played, but have still conceded 5 goals. Now, this could go on to Robert Sanchez, that he's not saving the chances that he should be, but it also could be said that Chelsea have been slightly unlucky in some of the goals they've conceded. The next one is the attack zones and the attack sides from who scored, very much showing that Chelsea are looking to exploit that left side and then make their way over to the right or the middle to find that last attacking piece, so that final shot or that final pass. And this shows a lot with Enzo Fernandez playing on that left side, dropping into that left pocket, trying to progress play through the left, but then work their way over to the right, where the game changers have been Cole Palmer and Noni Madueke so far this season. And then just an image I saw on Twitter from Data Analytics EPL, just showing that Chelsea's field tilt has improved. And again, go look at last season's, you'll see the field tilt wasn't one of their best factors, but this season you're seeing a little bit of an increase in that. And the last thing I wanted to touch on, as I've been saying throughout the video, is just that ability to change the game. People were very insistent that Maresca was stubborn. I did try to tell people that he's not as stubborn as people think, but they were very regimented on the fact that he plays a 3-2-5 and he wants to keep the ball, so he must be stubborn in his approach. But as you can already see this season, it's more about how you can gain an advantage on the pitch. He sees it as a chessboard and he makes the moves necessary. So hopefully that one could be put to bed, as we're already beginning to see the more tools at his disposal, the more he can come up with to allow Chelsea to have an overload or just an advantage in the game. So let me know down below what you've made of the first 5 games of the season. As I said at the start of the video, I'm going to try to make this a little international break thing where we do a little recap of all the games that have been played between each international break. Gives us something to look at that is Chelsea related, and we can go over little positives and negatives from each game. Let me know yours down below, drop a like, and please do subscribe if you haven't already.